Welcome back to Starbound Valor HFY. The rise of humanity continues for thousands of cycles. The Galactic Council ruled the known universe. It was a massive ring of power made of the oldest and strongest alien species. They controlled trade, war, borders, and laws. Every major decision passed through their chambers. To them, order mattered more than justice. Control mattered more than truth. Humans were one of the youngest species to join the Council, and from the very beginning, they were judged as weak. Humans felt too much. They questioned too much. They did not bow easily. The Council believed that made them dangerous, but not powerful. So they labeled humans as useful tools, nothing more. Humans were never allowed to lead. They were never given high command in fleets. They were never trusted with final decisions. Instead, they were sent to fix problems others created. Humans repaired damaged systems, stabilized failing economies, and defended border worlds that were already lost causes. When something went wrong, humans were blamed. When something went right, the Council took credit. Over time, this became normal. Many humans hated it, but they stayed silent. They observed. They learned. They remembered. Inside the Council chamber, alien leaders often spoke about humans as if they were not present. They called them emotional, unstable, and temporary. They said humans would burn out quickly like a weak star. Some even laughed, saying humanity should be grateful to even sit in the chamber. Humans heard every word. They showed no reaction. Their faces stayed calm. Their voices stayed soft. But silence does not mean weakness. Sometimes, silence is preparation. That day began like any other Council meeting. The chamber was full. Light from distant stars shined through the massive glass walls. The Council speaker, an ancient being of crystal and fire, listed new demands. Humans were ordered to give more ships, more soldiers, and more resources. In return, they would receive nothing. No protection. No vote. No respect. The order was final. The speaker expected compliance, as always. A human delegate stood up. Not in anger. Not in fear. Slowly. Calmly. The room fell quiet. This was unusual. Humans rarely spoke unless spoken to. The delegate looked around the chamber. At the towering figures. At the beings who thought they owned the universe. Then the human spoke in a steady voice. He did not shout. He did not threaten. He simply said that humanity would no longer serve a system that only knew how to take. He said humans were leaving the Council. For a moment, no one reacted. Then the chamber filled with laughter. Some Council members mocked the idea. Others waved it off as an empty gesture. Humans had no power, they said. No influence. No importance. Let them go. The Council speaker gave no reply. He turned away, already moving to the next topic. To him, humanity was finished. The human delegate said nothing more. He nodded once and walked out. Other human representatives followed. No speeches. No protests. No dramatic exits. Just footsteps echoing across the chamber floor. Doors closed behind them. Humanity was gone. Across the galaxy, the news spread quickly. Many species laughed. Some felt relief. Others felt nothing at all. Trade continued. Fleets moved as planned. The Council remained confident. Humans were forgotten in days. Then the first star system went dark. It was a mining system near the outer rim. No major population. No great value. At first, the Council assumed it was a natural failure. Stars died all the time. But reports came in fast. The star had not died. It had been shut down. Energy readings dropped to 0 in seconds. Planets froze. Stations lost power. Millions vanished into silence. Council scientists were confused. Their technology could not do this. No known weapon could either. Patrol fleets were sent, but they found nothing. No enemy. No wreckage. Just darkness where light once existed. Soon after, another system failed. Then another. Trade routes collapsed as navigation beacons stopped working. Communication relays went silent. Panic spread among merchant guilds and border worlds. The council called emergency sessions. Arguments filled the chamber. Accusations were made. No answers were found. Some members began to remember the humans. Quietly, they asked questions. Who maintained the energy grids? Who stabilized the stars? Who protected the systems no one cared about? The answer was always the same. Humans. But humans did not answer calls. They did not respond to messages. Their space was sealed. Their signals were hidden. It was as if humanity had vanished from the galaxy entirely. More systems went dark. Refugees flooded into council space, bringing fear and chaos. Fleets failed to stop whatever was happening. The council's control began to crack. For the first time in thousands of cycles, the universe did not listen to them. Far away, beyond known space, humans watched. They did not celebrate. They did not smile. They knew what was coming. They had warned the council once, long ago, about forces beyond the edge of the galaxy. Forces that fed on light and order. The council ignored them. Now, without human systems holding the line, the universe was paying the price. And this was only the beginning. The Galactic Council did not panic at first. They told themselves that the dark systems were rare events, strange but manageable. In the Great Chamber, the council speaker ordered calm and control. He said the universe had faced disasters before and survived. The alien leaders agreed, but their voices were weaker than before. Reports continued to arrive, each worse than the last. Systems were not just failing. They were being emptied. Power grids shut down perfectly, as if someone had planned every second. Defense stations went offline without alarms. It was clean, silent, and terrifying. Council fleets were sent deeper into affected space. The ships were large and heavily armed, built to crush rebellions and small wars. But they found nothing to fight. No enemy fleets. No weapons fire. Just dead stars and frozen worlds. Sensors showed traces of old stabilizer tech, the kind humans used. But the council ignored this detail. Admitting it would mean admitting dependence. Instead, they blamed pirates, rogue AIs, or unknown natural forces. Anything but humans. As weeks passed, the galaxy began to feel the damage. Trade routes collapsed because ships could not jump safely. Food shipments failed to arrive on crowded worlds. Energy prices rose fast. Small colonies begged the council for help, but help came late or not at all. The council was built to rule, not to repair. That work had always been given to humans. Now no one was left to do it. Inside the chamber, arguments turned sharp. Some council members accused others of hiding information. Old rivalries returned. Trust broke down. Emergency laws were passed and then ignored. The council speaker demanded loyalty, but his words no longer carried weight. For the first time, the council felt fear. Not of an enemy, but of losing control. On distant border worlds, people began to talk about humans. They remembered how human engineers fixed failing stars without asking for praise. They remembered human fleets arriving to defend systems the council had already abandoned. Humans were never loud. They never demanded thanks. They simply worked and moved on. Now that quiet presence was gone, and the silence it left behind was dangerous. Another system went dark, this one closer to the core. Billions were affected. Panic spread fast. Refugees flooded into nearby sectors, overwhelming defenses and supplies. Riots broke out. Governments fell. The council ordered fleets to contain the chaos, but soldiers could not fight hunger or fear. The galaxy was breaking apart piece by piece. Finally, a junior analyst spoke during an emergency session. He was young and nervous, but desperate enough to speak the truth. He presented data showing that nearly every failed system had once been maintained by humans. Energy stabilizers, star balance arrays, deep space warning nets, all designed by human minds. When humans left, they took their oversight with them. The systems did not fail by accident. They were failing because no one else understood how they truly worked. The chamber fell quiet. No one laughed this time. The council speaker dismissed the analyst and ordered the data sealed. But the damage was done. Others had seen it. Whispers spread. Some council members began to wonder if humanity had not just walked away, but stepped aside on purpose. Outside council space, darker things began to move. Ancient signals awakened, ones that humans had monitored for generations. Without human watchers, those signals grew stronger. Shapes moved in the void between stars. Not fleets. Not machines. Something older. Something hungry. The council did not see this. They had never listened when humans spoke of threats beyond known space. A council fleet finally encountered something near a dead system. Sensors failed. Ships vanished one by one without explosions. Crews screamed, then went silent. The remaining ships fled. The survivors brought back only fragments of data and terror in their eyes. They said the darkness itself had moved. The council called it impossible. Fear turned into desperation. The council speaker ordered an emergency message sent to human space. The message was polite, respectful, almost pleading. It asked for assistance, for cooperation, for a return to stability. The message went unanswered. Days passed. More systems failed. The galaxy burned quietly. Some council members broke ranks. They sent their own messages to humans, admitting past mistakes, promising change. Still no reply. Humanity remained silent, as they had been on the day they left. On a hidden human world, far from council reach, leaders watched the galaxy map change. Lights went out one by one. Human analysts tracked the spreading darkness. They knew the council would fail. It was not hatred that kept humans silent. It was certainty. The galaxy had ignored every warning. Now it had to learn. The council speaker finally admitted what he feared most. Without humans, the council was blind. Without humans, the galaxy was undefended. The universe was not going insane by chance. It was reacting to the absence of the only species that had truly understood it. And somewhere in the dark, something ancient smiled as the lights continued to die. The third collapse came without warning. It was not a border system or a forgotten mining sector. It was a major hub near the galactic core, a place of heavy traffic and massive population. When its primary star dimmed, panic exploded across the galaxy. Millions of ships were forced out of jump space. Stations lost gravity. Planets entered instant winter. The council could no longer pretend this was manageable. The universe was unraveling in real time, and everyone could see it. Emergency beacons flooded council channels. Governors screamed for help. Military commanders demanded clear orders. But the council had no answers. Their maps were outdated, their sensors unreliable. Human-built systems that once filtered threats and stabilized energy flows were offline. No one else knew how to restart them. Entire teams of alien scientists tried and failed. They followed manuals written by humans but could not understand the logic behind them. Human technology was not just machines. It was instinct turned into design. The council chamber became a place of chaos. Leaders argued openly, shouting accusations. Some blamed the council speaker. Others blamed the humans for abandoning their duty. A few, quieter voices said the truth. Humans had no duty to stay. They had warned the council many times. Those warnings had been ignored. Now pride was choking the galaxy. Refugee fleets filled space lanes. Entire species were on the move, searching for light and safety. Borders collapsed. Old enemies shared corridors just to survive. Starvation followed fear. Disease followed starvation. The council ordered quarantines that could not be enforced. Their fleets were stretched thin, guarding only the richest core worlds. Outer systems were sacrificed without discussion. This had always been the council's way, but now there was no one left to quietly fix the damage later. Then came the signal. It was faint and ancient, detected only because a forgotten human sensor array had not yet gone fully dark. The signal did not speak in words. It pulsed in patterns older than language. Council scientists struggled to decode it. When they finally understood its meaning, silence filled the room. It was not a message. It was a call. A beacon meant to guide something from deep beyond the galaxy. The council tried to shut the array down, but it was already too late. Other signals awakened across dead systems. They had been sleeping, held back by human containment fields and monitoring nets. With those gone, the galaxy was ringing like a dinner bell. Whatever lived beyond the dark now knew the way in. A task force was sent to investigate one of the signal sources. The fleet never returned. Long-range sensors showed distortions, as if space itself was bending. Stars flickered, then vanished. The Council officially declared the region lost. Unofficially, fear ruled every decision. On human worlds, the situation was different. Humanity had not gone silent out of anger. They had gone quiet to survive. Their hidden networks lit up as old alarms activated. Human commanders reviewed threat profiles long stored in secure archives. These were not guesses or theories. Humans had encountered this force before, long before joining the Council. They had pushed it back once, at terrible cost, and spent generations making sure it never returned. Human leaders watched the galaxy burn and felt no satisfaction. Only regret. Not for leaving the Council, but for trusting it. Humanity had built shields for worlds that were never theirs. They had protected species that laughed at them. Now those shields were down. The Council sent another message to humans, this one without pride. It admitted failure. It admitted fear. It asked not for partnership, but for rescue. The message reached human space. It was read. It was discussed. And then it was set aside. Humanity knew that acting too soon would change nothing. The galaxy needed to understand the cost of ignoring those who quietly held it together. As systems continued to fall, something else changed. The darkness began to move faster. It learned. Each collapse made the next easier. It adapted to Council weapons and defenses. Fleets that tried to fight were erased. Worlds that tried to hide were found. The Council's greatest strength, numbers, meant nothing to an enemy that fed on light and order. Inside the Council chamber, the Speaker stood alone more often. Many members had fled to private sanctuaries or sealed worlds. The unity that once defined the Council was gone. In its place was fear and regret. The Speaker finally spoke the words no one wanted to hear. The Council had never ruled the universe. It had only managed what humans had already secured. Far beyond the core, in the deep dark, the ancient force crossed the threshold into the galaxy. It had been waiting for this moment. Waiting for the humans to step aside. It did not fear the Council. It barely noticed them. And as another star went dark, humanity prepared for a war they had always known would return. The galaxy was no longer just failing. It was being hunted. The pattern became clear to those few who still watched closely. The darkness did not spread randomly anymore. It moved with purpose, targeting systems rich in energy, order, and life. Council analysts finally understood what humans had always feared. This was not a natural disaster. It was a predator. And the galaxy had just opened the door for it. Council defenses collapsed one after another. Massive fortresses that once guarded the core worlds went silent without a single shot. Automated weapons failed as if they had never existed. The enemy did not attack directly. It erased. Light vanished. Gravity twisted. Space folded inward. Entire systems were removed from existence as if they had never been there. No wreckage. No survivors. Only absence. Inside the Council chamber, panic ruled. Emergency seats stood empty. Many Council members had fled or sealed themselves away. The Council Speaker remained, surrounded by flickering holograms of lost worlds. He demanded solutions, but none came. Every strategy failed. Every weapon was useless. The Council had built its power on dominance, not understanding. Now understanding was the only thing that mattered, and they did not have it. A forgotten archive was opened in desperation. It contained records from the early days of human membership, warnings, proposals, and threat analyses that had been ignored. Humans had spoken of entities that lived between galaxies, drawn to structured energy and intelligent life. They had described how these beings could not be fought with force alone. They required balance, disruption, and sacrifice. The Council had laughed and voted to move on. The Speaker read one report again and again. It described a human-built network spread across the galaxy. Not a weapon, but a cage. Star stabilizers, energy dampeners, and observation nodes designed to confuse and weaken the ancient enemy. Humans had been maintaining this network quietly for centuries. It was never meant to last forever. It required constant care. When humans left, the cage broke. Outside council space, chaos ruled. Entire species were on the brink of extinction. Cultural centers burned. History was lost in seconds. Refugee ships crowded dying stars, desperate for any safe harbor. Many worlds turned to prayer. Others turned to violence. Order vanished. On human worlds, the truth was finally spoken openly. Humanity had known this day would come. Their scientists and explorers had first encountered the ancient darkness before humanity even left its home system. They had lost fleets and worlds learning its nature. The Council had never believed them, so humans had acted alone. They joined the Council not for power, but to build the cage quietly across the galaxy. Human leaders debated their next move. Some argued that the galaxy had made its choice. Others said innocent lives still mattered. Humanity had always been divided, but one thing united them. They would not beg for respect. If they returned, it would be on their terms. The darkness struck closer to human-controlled space. Border alarms triggered. Long silent defense platforms woke. Unlike Council weapons, these systems did not fire beams or missiles. They bent space, redirected energy, and confused the enemy's senses. For the first time since its return, the darkness slowed. Human analysts confirmed it. The enemy could be delayed, weakened, even pushed back. But only with the full network active. Only if humans took control again. Partial action would fail. Half measures would only make things worse. A final council message arrived. The speaker no longer sounded proud or angry. He sounded small. He admitted that the council had failed the galaxy. He admitted that humanity had been right. He asked not for forgiveness, but for survival. He offered the council's dissolution, its power, its history. Anything. The human response was not immediate. Silence stretched. Human leaders looked at the map of the galaxy, now filled with dark scars. They knew that saving it would cost lives, resources, and perhaps humanity's future. But they also knew that if they did nothing, the darkness would eventually reach them anyway. The decision was made quietly. Humanity would act, but not as servants. Not as tools. They would not rebuild the old order. They would build something new. Deep in human space, ancient shipyards came alive. Fleets that had never been shown to the Council began to move. Not in grand formations, but in precise, purposeful patterns. Each ship carried technology designed not to destroy, but to contain, redirect, and endure. As another core system vanished, a single human signal finally left human space. It was not sent to the Council. It was broadcast to the entire galaxy. We are returning. Stand aside. And in the darkness between stars, the ancient enemy felt something it had not felt in ages. Resistance. The human signal spread faster than fear. Across broken systems and crowded refugee fleets, the message repeated again and again. Humans were returning. Not to rule. Not to join the Council. They were returning to fight. Many did not believe it at first. The Council had lied too many times. Hope felt dangerous. But then human ships began to appear. Not near the core. Not near power centers. They appeared at the edges of darkness, where stars were flickering and space itself seemed wounded. These ships did not look like Council fleets. They were smaller, darker, and strangely quiet. They did not broadcast threats. They did not announce commands. They simply moved into position and activated systems no one else understood. Space around them twisted softly, like water around stone, and the darkness slowed. For the first time in many cycles, a system stopped dying. The galaxy noticed. Council observers watched in disbelief. Human ships did not attack the ancient enemy directly. They did not chase it or fire at it. Instead, they reshaped the battlefield. Energy flows changed. Gravity stabilized. Light returned where it had been stolen. The darkness tried to advance and failed. It recoiled, confused, as if it had struck an invisible wall. Panic inside the council chamber turned into stunned silence. Everything humans had warned about was proving true. Everything the council had ignored was now saving worlds. As more human fleets arrived, patterns became clear. Humans were rebuilding the cage. Star by star, system by system, they reactivated old networks and added new ones. Human engineers worked at impossible speed, often under direct threat. Ships were lost. Lives were lost. Humans did not retreat. They had prepared for this war long before anyone else believed it existed. This was not revenge. This was duty, chosen freely. The ancient enemy reacted. It shifted tactics. Where it could not erase systems, it corrupted them. Stars burned too bright and tore themselves apart. Planets shattered from inside. Council worlds that humans could not reach in time vanished in waves of distorted light. Each loss strengthened the enemy's resolve. It pushed toward the core again, searching for a weakness. It found one. The Council itself. The enemy struck the heart of Council space. Defense rings failed instantly. Ancient capital worlds lost orbit and drifted into darkness. Billions died in moments. The Council speaker watched his civilization crumble on a silent screen. He understood then that humans had never been exaggerating. The enemy did not hate the Council. It barely noticed them. It was drawn to complexity, to control, to rigid order. The Council had built itself into a beacon. Human fleets diverted immediately. They moved to intercept, stretching their lines thin. Human commanders argued in clipped, urgent voices. The network was not complete. Acting now risked collapse. But waiting meant extinction for millions more. Humanity chose to act. They always did. The largest human fleet ever assembled emerged near the core. Ships formed layered patterns, creating overlapping fields of distortion and balance. The darkness struck them like a tidal wave. Human ships vanished. Others cracked apart. But the line held. Human sacrifice slowed the enemy enough for evacuation corridors to open. Refugees escaped through paths only human navigation systems could calculate. Council citizens who once laughed at humans now fled through routes humans died to keep open. In the middle of the chaos, a human command vessel transmitted a direct message to the Council speaker. It was brief. Humans were not there to save the Council. They were there to save the galaxy. The Council was ordered to stand down and stop interfering. Any attempt to reclaim control would be treated as a threat. The speaker agreed without argument. Power meant nothing now. As the battle continued, something unexpected happened. Smaller species began to act. Worlds that had survived because of human protection offered support. Supplies, scouts, and crews volunteered to assist human operations. For the first time, the galaxy was not divided by Council law. It was united by survival. Humans coordinated quietly, efficiently, without demanding loyalty or praise. They did not build an empire. They built a defense. The ancient enemy felt the change. The galaxy was no longer passive prey. It was resisting as a whole. The darkness pressed harder, burning through stars in rage. But every gain cost it more effort. Human analysts saw it clearly. The enemy could be stopped. Not destroyed, but pushed back beyond the edge again. It would take everything humanity had left. On a distant human world, a memorial light was lit. Names of lost ships scrolled endlessly. Children watched in silence. Humanity had known this price. They paid it anyway. As the battle reached its peak, the human network finally locked into place. A massive wave of balanced energy spread across connected systems. The darkness screamed without sound and began to retreat. Not defeated, but wounded and driven away. Stars stabilized. Systems stopped falling. The galaxy breathed for the first time in ages. Human fleets did not celebrate. They held their positions, watching the dark carefully. They knew this was not the end. But it was a beginning. And across the galaxy, one truth became impossible to deny. When humans left the Council, the universe did not go insane. It was revealed for what it truly was. and only humanity had been ready to face it. The retreat of the ancient darkness did not bring peace. It brought silence, heavy and uncertain. Stars that had been saved burned steadily, but no one trusted the light anymore. Human fleets remained in position, forming a quiet wall between the galaxy and the void beyond. Repairs began immediately. Human engineers worked without rest, restoring stabilizers, recalibrating energy flows, and sealing the wounds left in space itself. They did not announce victories. They did not claim credit. They simply worked, as they always had. Across the galaxy, survivors tried to understand what had happened. Entire civilizations had vanished. Others had been saved at the last possible moment. Refugees gathered on temporary worlds protected by human fields. Many saw humans up close for the first time, not as servants or tools, but as calm, focused protectors. There was no anger in human eyes, only exhaustion and resolve. The old image of humanity began to crack. The Galactic Council still existed, but only in name. Its chamber was damaged, its members scattered and fearful. The council speaker remained, though he held no real power. For the first time in thousands of cycles, council law meant nothing outside its walls. Trade followed human-secured routes. Communication passed through human networks. Defense relied entirely on human coordination. The galaxy had changed, and everyone felt it. Some council members demanded that humans return control. They argued that order required leadership and structure. Humans listened and said nothing. Then they acted. A human delegation arrived at the council chamber. Not in warships, but in a single transport. No guards. No weapons visible. The message was clear. Humans did not fear the council. The human representative spoke simply. Humanity would not rejoin the council. They would not rule it either. The council had proven that it could not protect the galaxy. Humans would continue to maintain the defense network, but governance would no longer come from a single chamber of power. Each species would decide its own path, as long as it did not threaten the balance that kept the darkness away. The council speaker protested weakly. He warned of chaos, of wars without central control. The human representative replied that the galaxy had already nearly died under council control. Silence followed. No one argued further. Not all accepted this change. Some powerful species feared losing privilege. Secret meetings took place. Old alliances whispered of taking back control once humans grew tired or weak. Humanity knew this. They had expected it. They did not respond with threats. They responded with preparation. Human intelligence networks expanded quietly. Not to spy, but to watch for imbalance. Human fleets adjusted positions, not to dominate, but to respond instantly if needed. Humans shared defensive technology freely, teaching other species how to maintain their own systems. It was slow. Mistakes were made. But dependence on the council faded day by day. The ancient enemy was not gone. Human sensors tracked its movements beyond the galactic edge. It was wounded, cautious, learning. Humanity knew it would return someday. The cage was stronger now, but not perfect. Constant care was required. This was not a war that could be won once. It was a responsibility that would never end. On human worlds, debate continued. The cost had been high. Ships lost. Lives gone. Some asked if it was worth saving a galaxy that had treated humanity as expendable. Others answered quietly that humanity did not protect the galaxy for praise. They did it because someone had to. This belief had shaped humanity long before the stars. Slowly, trust began to form. Worlds that had been saved sent messages of gratitude. Not to the council, but to human commanders and engineers. Humans accepted thanks awkwardly, often redirecting it to joint crews or local defenders. They did not want worship. They wanted cooperation. A new pattern emerged. Instead of a single council, regional alliances formed. Smaller groups shared resources and defense, coordinated through human-maintained networks. Conflict did not vanish, but it was contained. When tensions rose, humans intervened not with force, but with presence. Their ships would appear, silent and steady, and violence would pause. Everyone remembered what waited beyond the stars. The council speaker watched all of this from the ruins of his chamber. He understood now what true power was. It was not command or law. It was responsibility. Humans had carried that weight alone for centuries without recognition. When they finally stepped away, the galaxy collapsed. When they returned, it survived. One final message from the council reached human leadership. It offered to dissolve completely, to hand over all records and authority. Humans refused. They did not want to replace the council. They wanted to make it unnecessary. As the galaxy slowly stabilized, a human commander looked out at the stars and spoke words that would be remembered for generations. Humans did not abandon the council to punish it. They left because they had learned that saving the universe required more than sitting in a chamber of power. It required standing in the dark. And staying there. The galaxy entered a strange new age, one without a single ruler or a central throne. Life did not return to normal, because normal had been built on the council's shadow. Instead, something quieter and more fragile began to grow. Human fleets remained spread across key regions, not as conquerors, but as anchors. Where their ships stayed, systems stabilized. Where they left, local species learned to stand on their own. Humanity was careful not to replace the old order with a new empire. They had seen what unchecked power did, and they refused to repeat it. Many species struggled with this change. For thousands of cycles, they had depended on the council to decide everything. Now decisions were their own, and mistakes were costly. Some worlds fell into conflict, testing old grudges and new freedoms. Humans did not rush in to control them. They watched, measured, and intervened only when imbalance threatened the larger network. When they did step in, it was calm and firm. Their ships would arrive, hold position, and wait. Violence almost always stopped. Everyone knew what humans were guarding against. Among the former council elites, resentment grew. They had lost status, influence, and privilege. To them, humanity's refusal to rule felt like an insult. In secret, a small group began to plot. They believed the ancient darkness was weakened enough to be used rather than feared. They had fragments of old data, stolen from abandoned council archives. They convinced themselves that humans were exaggerating the threat to maintain control without wearing a crown. These dissidents began experimenting. On a hidden world, far from human patrol routes, they reactivated a damaged signal array. They believed they could attract a small portion of the ancient force and trap it. They dreamed of wielding fear as a weapon and forcing the galaxy back under their rule. The first test went unnoticed. The second did not. Human sensors detected the disturbance immediately. The pattern was wrong. Dangerous. Old alarms flashed across human networks, ones that had not activated since the first war against the darkness. Human commanders understood at once. Someone was trying to call the enemy back. A human task group was dispatched, moving faster than any council fleet ever had. They did not announce themselves. They did not threaten. When they arrived, the hidden world was already changing. The sky was darker. Stars flickered unnaturally. The dissidents celebrated at first, believing their plan was working. Then the ground began to shake. Their control failed within moments. Humans shut the array down and evacuated what civilians they could. The dissident leaders were left behind, staring into a sky that no longer obeyed them. The human commander sent a single message to the galaxy. The ancient darkness could not be controlled. Any attempt to summon it would be treated as a threat to all life. There would be no second warning. The message spread quickly. Fear followed, but so did understanding. Even those who still distrusted humans began to accept a hard truth. Humanity was not exaggerating. They were restraining themselves. As the years passed, human influence changed shape. They no longer stood only at the borders of darkness. They began teaching. Human engineers trained other species to maintain stabilizers. Human scientists shared simplified versions of their models, enough for others to understand the balance without touching its most dangerous edges. Knowledge that had once been hoarded by the Council was now shared carefully, with responsibility. A generation grew up that had never known the Council as ruler. To them, humans were not servants or rebels. They were guardians. Not perfect, not worshipped, but trusted. Children on distant worlds learn stories not about council decrees, but about the day humans walked away and saved the galaxy by doing so. Humanity paid a price for this role. Resources were stretched. Crews served long rotations far from home. Losses still happened when the darkness pressed against the cage. Humans mourned quietly and moved on. They did not build statues. They recorded names and remembered. The ancient enemy remained beyond the edge, watching. It tested the cage again and again, probing for weakness. Each time, the network held. Not because of a single species, but because the galaxy had begun to share the burden. Humans coordinated, but they were no longer alone. In the ruins of the old council chamber, the speaker spent his final days recording history. He spoke of pride, blindness, and failure. He spoke of humans, not as saviors, but as the only ones willing to accept responsibility without demanding control. His final record ended with a simple truth. The council had believed power was the ability to command. Humans had proven that true power was the choice to protect, even when no one asked. As the stars slowly stabilized and new alliances formed, the galaxy learned to live without a throne at its center. It was harder, messier, more dangerous, but it was real. And at the edges of space, where the darkness waited, human ships still stood watch, silent and steady, not as rulers of the universe, but as its last line of defense. The attempt to summon the darkness changed everything. What had been quiet tension turned into open awareness. Worlds that once argued about politics now spoke about survival. The truth spread fast. The ancient enemy was not a story from human archives. It was real, patient, and still watching. The galaxy understood that one reckless act could undo years of hard work. Fear returned, but this time it was focused, controlled, and shared. Human command tightened the network. Patrol routes shifted. Observation arrays increased sensitivity. The cage around the galaxy grew denser, more flexible, and more alive. Humans did not centralize control. Instead, they assigned regions to joint teams made of different species, each trained to understand their role in maintaining balance. Humanity led quietly, correcting errors and stepping in only when limits were crossed. Not everyone accepted this order. A few powerful worlds resented being watched, even if that watch kept them alive. They saw human coordination as hidden rule. These worlds began to test boundaries. They delayed maintenance. They questioned alerts. They pushed systems closer to instability, believing humans would always step in at the last moment. Humanity noticed and recorded everything. The ancient darkness felt these disturbances. It pressed harder against weakened points, sensing opportunity. In one region, the cage bent too far. Space distorted violently. A star flared, threatening to collapse into nothing. Human fleets rushed in, joined by local forces. Together, they stabilized the system at great cost. Several human ships were lost holding the line. The system survived, but the message was clear. The network could fail if trust failed. Human leaders addressed the galaxy openly for the first time since their return. The message was simple. Humanity would protect the galaxy, but not from itself. Balance required responsibility. Any world that endangered the network would be isolated, not punished, but removed from shared protection. The darkness would not be used as leverage, but neither would humanity sacrifice itself to save those who refused to care. The statement caused fear, but also clarity. Many worlds corrected course immediately. Maintenance resumed. Cooperation increased. The few that resisted found themselves alone, their space lanes quiet, their warnings unanswered. Most quickly returned to the network, understanding the risk. Deep beyond the edge, the ancient enemy changed. It learned from every failed attempt. It began shaping the darkness differently, creating pressure points meant to exhaust the defenders. Humans saw the pattern forming and understood what it meant. The enemy was preparing for a major push, not at the core, but across multiple regions at once. It was testing the galaxy's unity. Humanity responded by doing something unexpected. They stepped back. Human fleets reduced visible presence in several stable regions, leaving control to local alliances. This was not weakness. It was a test. Could the galaxy hold without constant human intervention? The test was brutal. In some regions, cooperation failed. Systems destabilized and had to be rescued at the last moment. In others, something remarkable happened. Species that once distrusted each other worked together. They shared power, data, and risk. They held the cage steady without human ships in sight. Humanity watched, adjusted, and learned. The ancient enemy struck during this moment of transition. Multiple regions flared at once. Space twisted violently. Darkness pushed against the cage from several angles. This was the largest test since the first retreat. Human fleets surged back into motion, reinforcing where needed, trusting where possible. The galaxy fought as one, uneven but determined. The battle did not look like war. There were no lines or charges. It was a constant struggle of balance, pressure, and control. Engineers replaced soldiers. Calculations mattered more than firepower. When a joint team succeeded in stabilizing a collapsing system without human ships, the signal echoed across the network. Confidence grew. The ancient enemy felt resistance everywhere. It could no longer isolate prey easily. Each push met coordinated response. The darkness recoiled again, not defeated, but frustrated. It withdrew slightly, conserving strength. In the aftermath, the galaxy was changed. Losses were counted. Lessons were learned. Humanity recognized that the galaxy was slowly becoming capable of protecting itself, at least partially. This was the goal all along. Humans did not want to stand forever as the only wall. They wanted to teach others how to help hold it. A final quiet report reached human leadership. The enemy was not gone. It was waiting, adapting, and growing more patient. The next return would be worse. Humanity accepted this. They had never believed in permanent victory. As human ships returned to their watch positions, a new understanding settled across the stars. The galaxy no longer asked who ruled. It asked who was responsible. The answer was no longer one species alone. But when the darkness came again, everyone still knew where to look first. Toward the humans standing in the dark, ready once more. The galaxy had changed in ways no one could have predicted. The Council no longer existed as it once had. Its authority had crumbled under its own arrogance, and its members scattered across distant systems, powerless and humiliated. Humans had returned, not to rule, but to protect. Their fleets moved silently through key regions, maintaining balance and watching the edge of the galaxy where the darkness waited. Systems that had once fallen to chaos now stood stabilized. Trade routes reopened, communication relays hummed, and populations began to rebuild. But stability was fragile. The ancient enemy had learned from its failures. It had studied the galaxy's defenses, probing for weaknesses, and testing the limits of coordination among the species. It waited, patient and relentless, knowing that even one mistake could unravel everything. Humans did not rush to act preemptively. They understood the enemy's methods. Direct confrontation had always been costly, often fatal. Instead, human commanders focused on preparation. Systems were reinforced, not with weapons alone, but with stabilizers, energy conduits, and observational networks. Local species were trained in their operation. Every planet, every star system, every fleet became part of a living network of defense. Humans led quietly, directing coordination without claiming power. They did not demand obedience, they demanded responsibility. Not all species were pleased. Some former Council worlds bristled under human guidance, seeing it as covert dominance. Secret meetings were held in hidden sectors, conspiracies whispered in corridors of abandoned stations. Leaders argued that humans were overstepping, that the galaxy should stand on its own without interference. But the human response was always the same: watch, measure, and correct only when necessary. Force was a last resort, and education the first. The ancient darkness began its next test. Small, strategic pulses of energy bent space and star systems in the outer rim. Colonies vanished quietly, stars flickered and dimmed, and fleets sent to investigate reported only distortion and silence. These attacks were different from before. They were deliberate, targeted, and meant to provoke panic. But humanity had anticipated the pattern. Fleets responded immediately, redirecting energy flows, reinforcing stabilizers, and restoring disrupted systems faster than the enemy could destroy them. Local forces began to act independently, holding space under human guidance. This was the moment humans had hoped for, the galaxy learning to defend itself. Even as resistance grew, the enemy struck unexpectedly at a vulnerable core system. Council remnants had been secretly hoarding resources there, hoping to regain influence. They were caught unprepared. Human fleets surged to the region, reinforcing defenses, evacuating civilians, and stabilizing stars that teetered on the edge of collapse. The ancient darkness recoiled when human networks countered its advance, but it learned with each failure. Its attacks became faster, more coordinated, forcing humans to make difficult choices: save some systems while others fell, or risk spreading their forces too thin. Human leaders convened a council of their own. Representatives from multiple species attended, not as subordinates, but as partners. They shared observations, analyzed failures, and refined strategies. It became clear that the galaxy was at a crossroads. Either species would learn to work together, share responsibility, and maintain the balance, or the darkness would slowly unravel everything humans had rebuilt. This was the ultimate lesson. Survival required unity, and humans were both guides and enforcers of that fragile unity. As the next wave of attacks began, the network's strength was tested like never before. Multiple systems in different regions were destabilized simultaneously. Space itself seemed to bend under pressure. Civilizations that had relied solely on humans faltered. Human fleets moved strategically, not to conquer, but to support. Systems stabilized just in time, and evacuations were conducted with precision. The ancient enemy pressed harder, frustrated that its usual strategies failed. It had underestimated not the humans themselves, but the network of cooperation they had created. For the first time, independent fleets, species that had once resisted human guidance, successfully held systems without direct intervention. Ships coordinated, energy flows were balanced, and communication networks operated autonomously. Humans watched quietly, stepping in only when necessary. The galaxy had begun to stand on its own. Humanity's lesson was being learned. Leadership was not about power, it was about responsibility, teaching others to carry their own weight while holding the line when they could not. The ancient darkness, sensing that subtle shift, altered tactics once again. It tried to strike multiple regions at once, stretching the human-led network to its limits. Stars flared violently, gravity shifted, and energy conduits threatened to collapse. Human fleets responded, coordinating with local forces to stabilize each system. Sacrifices were inevitable. Ships and crews were lost. Systems fell temporarily before being restored. Humanity's price was high, but the galaxy endured. Each victory was a lesson for those who had doubted them. Finally, after cycles of coordinated effort, the enemy began to retreat, not destroyed but weakened and cautious. The network had held. Systems that once depended entirely on human intervention were now capable of maintaining stability on their own, at least for the moment. The lesson was clear: the galaxy could survive, but only if the species continued to cooperate, learn, and take responsibility. Humans had proven that leadership was not about control. It was about guidance, sacrifice, and teaching others to protect themselves. As the ancient darkness withdrew to the edge of known space, human fleets remained vigilant. Their presence was quiet but constant. The galaxy had changed forever. No single species ruled. No council dictated fate. Yet safety existed because humans had chosen to protect, not dominate. Across the stars, civilizations began to understand the new truth. The galaxy survived because humanity refused to abandon responsibility, even when the universe itself seemed determined to fall apart. And as humans watched the darkness retreat, they knew the lesson was not finished. One day, the enemy would return. One day, the galaxy would face its ultimate test. But now, it would not face it alone. The network had grown. Cooperation had been forged through trial. Responsibility had been shared. And humanity, once underestimated, now stood as the quiet, guiding force that ensured the survival of countless worlds, watching silently in the dark, ready for the day when the enemy returned. The galaxy had survived, but survival was only the beginning. The ancient darkness had retreated beyond known space, wounded but patient, and the lesson it left behind was unmistakable. Humanity had proven that power was not in titles, fleets, or councils, but in responsibility, foresight, and the willingness to act when no one else would. Across countless systems, civilizations began to rebuild, slowly and cautiously, learning to maintain their own networks, repair failing stars, and protect themselves without relying on a distant, ineffective council. Humans did not govern. They guided, teaching, observing, and intervening only when the fragile balance of the galaxy was at risk. Their fleets became a silent backbone, a quiet reminder of what could be achieved when intelligence, courage, and sacrifice combined. The remnants of the old council no longer dared to issue commands. They watched humanity and the networks with awe and fear, realizing that their authority had always been an illusion. For thousands of cycles, they had believed that ruling meant power, that issuing decrees was control. Now they understood that the galaxy had survived not because of them, but in spite of them. They had built walls that humans had quietly held together, stabilized systems that humans had maintained, and yet they had laughed when humans walked away. The council speaker, once the most powerful figure in the universe, now recorded histories that admitted failure, pride, and arrogance. He spoke of humans not as heroes, but as the only species willing to accept responsibility without claiming dominion. His final words were simple: control is an illusion. Responsibility is real. Meanwhile, humanity continued its quiet work. Fleets patrolled critical points near the edges of known space, monitoring the darkness and ensuring that newly stabilized systems held. Engineers repaired failing stars, recalibrated energy flows, and trained local species to take over maintenance in stages. Communication networks hummed with constant updates, not of orders or commands, but of observations, alerts, and guidance. Civilizations once dependent on the Council learned quickly. Cooperation replaced rivalry where it mattered most. The galaxy was not united under a single banner, but it was interconnected in ways that ensured survival. Humanity had not imposed rule, it had instilled understanding. Yet the universe was not at peace. The ancient darkness still lingered, studying the galaxy, testing boundaries, learning. Its previous failures had made it cautious, but it was patient. Humanity knew that it could return stronger, smarter, and more dangerous. They had prepared, but they understood the reality. The galaxy would never be entirely safe. Responsibility would never end. Every generation of humans, every fleet, every trained crew would need to remain vigilant. Guardianship was not a temporary role. It was eternal, a burden humanity had chosen freely and would carry as long as life existed in the stars. Across the galaxy, humans encountered species that were learning to protect themselves. In some regions, entire civilizations could now operate independently, managing their own stabilizers, energy conduits, and trade routes. In other regions, dependence still lingered, requiring active human oversight. This uneven distribution of responsibility taught a vital lesson. Survival was not guaranteed by strength or technology alone. It depended on understanding, cooperation, and the ability to act wisely in moments of crisis. Human fleets, though quiet, were always ready to support those who still struggled, never replacing them, but reinforcing their ability to endure. The balance between autonomy and guidance was delicate. One misstep could cascade into disaster, as the ancient darkness was waiting, patient and hungry. Human strategists coordinated closely, predicting enemy movements, simulating threats, and preparing contingencies. They did not overextend. They did not seek glory. They acted with precision and caution, knowing that a single failure could undo centuries of careful preparation. Humans had learned the cost of arrogance long before the Council had. Now they taught others, quietly, through action and example, that survival required humility as much as strength. Within the rebuilt networks, species once considered weak now found new roles. Engineers from multiple worlds collaborated on stabilizers, scientists monitored energy flows, and navigators guided fleets through dangerous sectors. Humans were always present as advisors, ready to intervene, but they allowed others to make decisions. Mistakes were inevitable, but learning was constant. The galaxy was becoming self-sufficient in ways previously unimaginable. Human patience, foresight, and teaching were slowly creating a civilization resilient enough to withstand future threats, even if humans were not always present. The darkness itself grew wary. It could sense the new cooperation, the networks of intelligence, the understanding that humans had spread across the galaxy. Where once it had destroyed systems with ease, now every move it made encountered resistance, guidance, and repair. The enemy learned that the galaxy was no longer fragmented and weak. It had become a network of guardians, with humans at the quiet center. Retreating and waiting became the enemy's only viable choice, a temporary pause until it could attempt a different strategy. But it had also learned something crucial. Direct attack was not sufficient. Subtlety and patience were now required. On human worlds, reflection was constant. Lives had been lost, ships destroyed, and countless systems had come dangerously close to annihilation. Memorials existed quietly, not as monuments, but as records and reminders. Humanity understood the cost of protection. They had acted without expectation of reward, without demand for loyalty, and without desire for dominion. Their motivation was simple. Life was worth defending, the universe was worth guarding, and responsibility was more important than control. Stories of their efforts spread across the stars, not as propaganda, but as lessons and warnings to all civilizations. Survival depended on vigilance, cooperation, and humility. The galaxy now faced a new era. No council ruled. No empire dominated. Civilizations were independent yet interconnected. Trade, communication, and defense relied on cooperation rather than obedience. Humans remained the quiet backbone, the silent guardians ensuring that the darkness could never return unchecked. The lessons learned from the past had reshaped the entire universe. Every species, every world, had a stake in its survival. Humanity had shown that true leadership was not the right to command, but the willingness to act when others could not. And in the deep black beyond known space, the ancient enemy waited. It had not been defeated. It had learned patience, and it would return one day. But when it did, it would face a galaxy ready to defend itself, united not by fear of rulers, but by shared understanding and responsibility. Humanity would be there, not to conquer, not to dominate, but to protect, as it had always done. And the universe, once on the brink of chaos, would endure. The price had been high, but the lesson was eternal. You may lose the light for a moment, but those who are willing to bear the responsibility can bring it back and keep it shining.